Hello everyone, welcome to another absolute mad one, where we are covering yet another climate subject I thought I'd never have to cover again. Yes, we unfortunately have to talk about the Swedish truant yet again. Greta Thunberg, climate activist, yada yada yada, you know who she is. But she has taken, in one sense, the most predictable step for any climate activist, because they all turn out to go this way. But she also seems to be going in the direction that should make her a bit of a darling to the Luddite right. Which is the one we are going to cover first, because, to be quite honest, it might turn out not to be true. But it's funny and seems to come from a somewhat reliable source, so let's go through it anyway. Infamous gossip blogger says Greta Thunberg is writing letters to the Unabomber. The claim alleges that Thunberg is a fan of Ted Kaczynski's writing. Greta Thunberg says anarchy now. All of a sudden, all the world leaders are hesitant to open any letter coming from Greta Thunberg. So a prominent Hollywood gossip blogger has claimed that Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg has been communicating with Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber. Now, I know a lot of you will be sceptical already, saying, oh, this is just a bit of gossip, but apparently there's a bit more to it. So the allegation was made on Sunday by the self-described Hollywood lawyer known as NT, who anonymously runs the famous Crazy Days and Nights blog. Over the last 15 years, NT has made a name for himself by outing celebrities he claims are tied to prominent scandals. NT has been credited with, among other things, dropping details about disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein years prior to the public undoing. So while you should take what this blog says with a grain of salt, there has been some credible scandals that have come out from this particular blog, so that says to me that this isn't entirely untrue. So in his most recent post, which it says came from a reader, NT alleged that authorities recently intercepted mail sent by Thunberg to Kaczynski, who is behind bars after killing 3 people and injuring 23 others between 1978 and 1995 as part of a nationwide bombing campaign. The authorities have intercepted correspondence between 2 people, a young foreign woman who has been in the news a lot the last few years for speaking her mind on a particular problem, and an infamous individual whose time in the public eye was before she was born, NT writes, which, okay, that's definitely both of them. Or could be both of them, I should say. The blog goes on to state that Kaczynski, who is at first referred to as the infamous individual, had caught the attention of Thunberg due to his writings. The infamous individual wrote something a long time ago that became public that the young woman agrees with, NT adds. She has been discussing both theory and implementation with him in the letters. Oh no, Greta, don't do it. See, this is what happens when you play truant, kids. No matter how good what you think you're doing outside school is, if you keep doing that, you'll turn into a terrorist. Though do bear in mind that these are just claims from a blog that only has some credibility. The Daily Dot did try to reach out to Ted Kaczynski, but they have received no reply. So it's up in the air whether that's true or not. I'm going to err on the side that it's not true, and this is the blog having a bit of a laugh. But now we need to get on to some more serious news, because these are things now that Greta Thunberg has actually said. Greta Thunberg, it's time to overthrow the West's oppressive and racist capitalist system. The activist claims that the world's current normal, dictated by the people in power, has caused the climate breakdown. Of course, if you actually had free markets, it wouldn't be dictated by anyone. It would be guided by the invisible hand of the market. From a climate change campaigner to presenting a new far-left political agenda against racist capitalism, meet the new Greta Thunberg. Of course, this isn't new at all. This is where every single bit of climate activism gets you. It's in all of their handbooks. I have read them. The 19-year-old Swede has announced that, as well as tackling her usual area of climate action and awareness spreading, she has now thrown her weight behind defeating the West's oppressive capitalist system. Calling for a system-wide transformation at her book launch in London, she claimed that the world's current normal, dictated by the people in power, has caused the climate breakdown. Of course she has, because that's what everyone else has told her. Also, she has a new book? What is going on? Sorry, a little bit of a tangent. I need to read this. The Climate book, which was created by Greta Thunberg, but not actually written by her, so that doesn't fill me with confidence. Summary: we still have time to change the world. From Greta Thunberg, the world's leading climate activist, comes the essential handbook for making it happen. It is 440 pages long. I am not putting myself through that. You might think it's an impossible task. Secure a safe future for life on Earth at a scale and speed never seen, against all the odds. There is hope, but only if we listen to the science before it's too late. Of course, there it is again, the science, not climatologists, not meteorologists, nothing like that. The science. Why don't you just say God? In the climate book, Greta Thunberg has gathered the wisdom of over 100 experts, geophysicists, see this is better, oceanographers and meteorologists, engineers, economists and mathematicians, historians, philosophers and indigenous leaders, to equip us with all the knowledge we need to combat climate disaster. Okay, I might like to read the geophysicist bits then. Alongside them, she shares her own stories of demonstrating and uncovering greenwashing around the world, revealing how much we have been kept in the dark. This is one of our biggest challenges, she shows, but also our greatest source of hope. Once we are given the full picture, how can we not act? And if the school child strike could ignite a global protest, what could we do collectively if we tried? We are alive at the most decisive time in the history of humanity. Together we can do the seemingly impossible. But it has to be us, and it has to be now. I mean, that just sounds horrendous, and it sounds long, and I don't particularly want to read it, I just want to read bits of it, so I'm not going to give anyone any money for that book. Though what I do find funny is the Telegraph's just quick review on it. Greta Thunberg's climate book is a great scientific one-stop shop despite its anti-capitalist bent. Right, 4 out of 5 stars, interesting. More than 100 scientists and campaigners have contributed to the 19-year-old Swede's book. The best of them look to technology for solutions. Which is very strange because that implies to me there's a big hole in this book. Capitalism seems to be the best way to find the best innovations. And when you're looking for a better technology, innovation is certainly the direction that you want to go. So having anti-capitalism in a book where you're saying technology is going to be our saviour, little bit odd. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that. I think we should get back to the main article. So Greta said at her book launch, "We are never going back to normal again because normal was already a crisis." Yeah, but it was more economic, less than it was environmental. Again, natural disasters, more people are surviving them than ever. What's the issue? What we refer to as normal is an extreme system built on the exploitation of people and the planet. It is a system defined by colonialism, imperialism, oppression and genocide by the so-called global north to accumulate wealth that still shapes our current world order. Ms. Thunberg then added, "If economic growth is our only priority," which I agree it shouldn't be, "then what are we experiencing now should be exactly what we should be expecting," which I assume is crisis. But again, she is focused entirely on the climate crisis rather than the economic crisis which we actually have. At least it's good to see that Greta Thunberg has not at all grown her critical thinking capacity and instead is still just a mouthpiece for other people as she has always been. This is a bit like having, I don't know, someone who left school at 16 become your shadow education secretary. Only the stupidest party in the world would do something like that. Tee-hee-hee-hee. But on a more serious note, it is important to know who Greta Thunberg's handlers are, because they will be the people effectively telling her what to say. They are the people using her as a human shield and the people who are despicable as far as I can tell. However, she is 19 now, so she should know better, but doesn't, because she's been fully indoctrinated into this. I mean, why would her handlers lie to her? They've only managed to get absolutely millions out of idiots buying a book. Anyway, speaking of political handlers, it turns out that this speech by Greta Thunberg was streamed at the book launch. So why don't we go through it?
Wow, it's truly amazing to see so many people in here, and thank you for the warm welcome. My name is Greta Thunberg. I am a climate activist from Sweden, and I want to use my platform to share the truth about the climate crisis, to tell the full story of how our world is changing and what we need to do about it.
Seriously, how do you effectively say the same things for 3 years and not get bored? I'm aware I say this as a YouTuber who's been saying quite similar things for 3 years, but here's the thing. I think if you watch through all my videos, you can see my ideas develop. I'm actually saying different things to 3 years ago. Because I've done this thing, I've developed understanding. And this is how you can tell that Greta Thunberg's not doing that. She's saying the exact same things. What she is saying here is being written for her. She's not thinking critically. She might unironically be one of those people who doesn't have an inner monologue. I mean, it's so hard to tell because no one really knows the real Greta. Because she is just a person who has been wheeled out to be a spokesperson for the climate cult. Because, quite frankly, people will just attack you for attacking someone who's very young, even though she's 19 now. It kind of worked when she was 16, but even at 16, I think you should be called stupid when you're being stupid. Although, again, she probably wasn't being stupid, just manipulated, but also she has autism, and apparently you can't criticise people with autism, that's just bad. Anyway, let's hear this radical thinking into thinking exactly the same as every other environmentalist movement has gone in the past 5 years.
That is why I created the Climate Book. With over 100 contributors, it aims to tell the full story and the holistic picture of the climate crisis and the different crises we face. And I started it about 2 years ago. Back then we were in the beginning of the pandemic. Our societies were undergoing massive changes with a purpose to keep people safe.
Yeah, now a lot of people seem to think that the massive amounts of lockdowns were somewhat a bad idea. In fact, over in America, they are trying to ask for a lockdown truce, I think they're calling it, or amnesty. You're basically saying, hey, forgive us, we didn't listen to you. Yet when you see people in Europe being battered in the streets for being outside, and people in Australia being put into large self-isolation camps against their will, you kind of think, don't really trust that hand that was crushing me the other year. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. Where are you going with this, Greta? Are you saying because it saved just one life we need to do it? Is that what we're going to say with the climate crisis? If it just saves one life, it's worth having thousands upon thousands, possibly even millions of people freezing to death this winter? Winters that are supposed to be getting bloody warmer.
At that time, many were already talking about going back to normal. But we are never going back to normal again.
Stuff like this is what makes WEF conspiracy theorists really go, for lack of a better term, nuts. Because yes, I have covered the WEF, and yes, I've seen the video. I've even covered it and thought that it was bad. That we are going to go into a new normal, and the new normal is essentially you will own nothing and be happy. Because that is really the message that seems to be coming across from Greta Thunberg here. So I can understand why you make all these links, but really I think we have to hear what she specifically says here.
Since then, things have become so much worse. Our global emissions of greenhouse gases are still on the rise.
I say this every time, I feel like a broken record, but again, that's because Greta Thunberg never changed what she says. Rising CO2 emissions are a third world problem. They're a problem from China and India. Those are the big ones anyway. Main reason for that? They're the ones making massive coal power plants. What's the reason for that? Coal is a lot cheaper and more efficient than the other types of renewable energy sources. You look at the UK's CO2 emissions, they are quite typical of other Western countries. They went up quite a lot, all the way up to the 2000s, and then they suddenly dropped after we all decided that CO2 was the international enemy. I literally don't know what more you want us to do. That is an insane rate of CO2 emissions going down. And most of that as well is because we exported manufacturing to places like, the places where CO2 emissions are going up. China, India, etc.
We are still expanding fossil fuel infrastructure.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like people don't want to freeze. It's almost like people don't want to freeze and also be able to afford to eat. She is so ironically short-sighted here. We have to do absolutely everything for green energy, even if it means sacrificing people who can't afford it.
Oil production is soaring all over the globe.
While the dirtier coal infrastructure is on its way out, yes. Tends to be how it works. Coal first, then oil, then gas, then you move on to nuclear or something like that. Because that's the way that pretty much every country has to make money. You go from the cheapest to the slightly more expensive infrastructure that turns out to be more efficient and less pollutant, even though CO2 isn't a pollutant. The word will do here, and then eventually, yes, people will have enough money to care about the environment and start going into renewables. Exactly where this doomsday is that we're constantly told about by the climate cultists, I'm still not actually sure. If they ever bring up Pakistan, please refer to my last Just Stop Oil video. That is more down to deforestation, and guess what's reduced as you start moving to coal, oil and gas? Deforestation starts to fall, because people don't need wood to cook on anymore.
The global amount of coal-fired electricity reached an all-time high in 2021.
Again, that's being made out that it's the West's fault, and it isn't. The West's moving away from coal, apart from Germany, which decided to not commission any new nuclear power plants, and now has to fire up a load of coal power plants because they don't have enough electricity. So I'm just saying, a lot of these problems, we're getting more oil, we're getting more coal. Yeah, there's a big amount of demand from it from people who are gonna, die, or at least have a much, much harder life, really reduce their living standards if we stop. Which again is, I guess, where the solution of communism comes in, but I guess I'll let her get to that.
But this should not come as a surprise. We will not make progress if we are not even trying to change.
It's like collective humanity has never done anything for the environment in her mind. It's all the leftist tactic. We are a victim of ourselves because we're a victim, and especially because the third world are a victim to the first world's check notes ability to trade for oil that the third world want. Then that means we have to punish ourselves even further. I mean, I've said it a million times, but nothing's ever going to be good enough for Greta Thunberg. I would just ignore her. And yes, I'm aware I'm making a video on her. I'm making a video on her to explain to you why you should ignore her.
The global concentration of CO2 is at its highest level since the emergence of Homo sapiens.
Well, at least statistically that range makes sense. Because I know when they typically use temperatures, it's typically 1887 is the year that they go from, because that happens to be the coldest year in the past few centuries. Whereas if you compare it to include the medieval warm period, the problems we're seeing now in terms of global temperatures really don't seem that bad.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, governments across the world launched unprecedented financial rescue packages.
Yeah, it's causing all sorts of economic turmoil. It was a really bad idea. Please don't say if we can do it in a pandemic, we can do it for the climate crisis. The economies cannot take any more.
These recovery plans were described as huge opportunities to set humanity on a brand new course for a more sustainable economic paradigm.
Yeah, it turned out to be total crap, what can I say? Growth forecasts continually seem to be downgraded. The pound is currently dropping again, despite the fact that, we got rid of crazy Kwarteng and Liz Truss. Thank God we've got Rishi, who's going to be a stable hand on the economy. Years of managed decline, that is now what is expected. Because, ironically, Rishi Sunak was the one in charge of the economy and made sure that we had a furlough scheme because the government decided to lock down for a disease that increased life expectancy. I mean, at this point, it's just clear cut. Lockdowns were a mistake on almost every level.
They were called our last chance to avert a climate disaster, as the enormous size of the investments would make it impossible for us to undo their consequences in the future if we got that funding even slightly wrong.
Oh, well, there you go. Now it's impossible to avoid climate disaster. We got the sums wrong, so according to Greta Thunberg, it turns out, yeah, we're all screwed, both economically and environmentally. Though, of course, because I read way more into this stuff than I probably need to, I know that it's only economically we are screwed.
However, in June 2021, the International Energy Agency concluded that out of the historic recovery plan, only a bleak 2% had been invested in green energy.
Yeah, duh. Everyone thought we had the Black Death. Why are you going to worry about a problem we're going to have 20 years in the future when there's a more immediate problem right now in those people's heads? You know, everyone was worried about the infection rate. Everyone was worried that the NHS was going to literally collapse. Everyone was worried we'd lose a third of our population. Why the hell are you going to care about the climate crisis? Why are you going to invest in that when your immediate plan is to stop this pandemic? The pandemic obviously would take over the climate crisis. I'm actually amazed 2% even went anywhere near green subsidies.
So our leaders did not just get it slightly wrong, they completely failed. We are never going back to normal. Either these investments will become stranded assets, or they will lock in a level of warming that our societies will not be able to adapt to.
This is why I said be cautious about linking it to the WEF. This isn't what the WEF Great Reset is. Greta is talking about a different concept. This concept is essentially the economy is absolutely screwed and there's going to be climate collapse. Basically prepare for war. Whereas the WEF are a lot more, kind of your old sci-fi dystopia of the technocrats are the ones who are going to manage your entire life and tell you what's going to be happy. That's not what Greta's talking about here, luckily, though, to be fair, that is what she wants as long as it's got a green stamp on it.
Our civilization was built during and for the Holocene, a geologic era that now belongs to the past.
Yeah, true. Geologists seem to agree now that we have moved on from the Holocene and are going into the Quaternary period. Tertiary is what we have just come out of, and therefore are going into a new era. Because the geological record is changing enough that we can describe it as a new era. And it's not even necessarily just down to climate changes and things like that in areas. It's also down to the fact that human waste, such as plastic, is making its way into the rock record. And another way we determine different geological periods is by extinction events, and believe it or not, because humans affect their environment so rapidly and are apex hunters, this has resulted in actually quite a large amount of extinctions, so we are actually currently living through an extinction event. But the world moves on. There's been 5 of them before that, and everything's carried on. I'm sure we'll be alright. Incredibly, though, we're actually reducing the damage quite a bit these days with conservation projects, but Greta doesn't care about that. Greta just wants windmills.
The basic conditions and life-supporting systems that we are depending on are being uprooted.
You're going to need to go into more detail on that. There have been events in the geological past that have caused absolute mass extinctions and massive changes to the climate. When plants started producing oxygen, my god, a lot of things died because of that. But changing geological periods don't necessarily mean huge climate-changing events, though obviously extinction ones do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that animals who lived in those climates beforehand are going to die. I mean, just look at the crocodile and alligator. They've been around since the time of the dinosaurs.
The planet is destabilizing. The climate and the biosphere are breaking down.
Again, this claim keeps being made, and then we keep getting news that there are more polar bears than ever and that the Great Barrier Reef is actually making a massive comeback. It's the issue with trying to identify a huge change in a geological period when you're living through one. I mean, when you see a change in a geological period, you are seeing a range that is literally millions of years. It's quite hard to tell. I mean, our best estimates with these type of things comes from where you can actually date rocks, which is quite difficult because you need radioactive elements, which can be quite rare to find in these rocks. And even so, when you go back far enough, the error bars are massive. What I'm basically trying to say is, the claim is that there's a complete collapse in all this environmental stuff. My point is, these things go up and down all the time in nature. It's when you have a long continuous down is where you get a problem. I don't see us being anywhere near that point yet.
We are never going back to normal again, because normal was already a crisis.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Our addiction to line go up, and our addiction to being tolerant of absolutely everything, even though if it's really bad for people. Yeah, I'd agree that type of normal is actually a bit of a crisis. Unfortunately, I think you're actually for all that type of crisis.
What we refer to as normal is an extreme system built on exploitation of people and planet.
Human survival from the very beginning has been about exploiting nature. Absolutely every civilization had to chop down trees and kill things to stay warm and live. We just happen to do it now on an industrial scale, and we are finding the best way to do that. To say it's a crisis is just ridiculous.
It is a system defined by colonialism, imperialism, oppression, and genocide by the so-called global north to accumulate wealth that still shapes our current world order.
I've got to gone to university now and done a semester in feminist theory or something. Because if not, I assume that her handlers have finally gone mask off with what they actually want. Capitalism bad, buy my book.
Some people say that the system is now malfunctioning, but that is not true. The system is doing exactly what it is meant to be doing.
Yes, the global north absolutely wants to keep the global south repressed. That's why most foreign funding goes there. What is this mental take?
If economic growth is our only priority, then what we are experiencing now should be exactly what we should be expecting.
I mean, she is technically correct there. The only problem is that her handlers are taking this as we're too pro-market, when most of the West has been very much going more anti-market with policies for years, and the economy's only got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when that trend's booked with someone like Liz Truss and the markets go a bit volatile, everyone's like, oh no, keep doing what we're doing. Like, that was good. Like, you know, Greta's technically right here, as I say. The problem is that her solution is to add to the problem. Because whoever her handlers are ideologically possessed. If it turns out to be her parents, shame on them. Frankly, well, I guess she's an adult now, so she can't be taken away from them, but people still think she's a child. So I don't know, that's just a weird situation for her. Greta, do your own thing. This fame and fortune is going to make you go mad.
To solve this problem, we first need to understand it.
Go on, Greta, tell me what the problem is.
and to understand the fact that the problem itself is by definition a series of interconnected problems.
Would you say that these problems are intersectional by any chance, Greta? Oh.
It is a symptom of a much larger crisis, the sustainability crisis.
Okay, so on top of Greta Thunberg's intersectional stack, we have sustainability issues. It's a good thing innovations are really trying to find ways to get us away from oil and gas then, isn't it?
It has its roots in racist, oppressive extractivism that is sacrificing people and nature to maximize short-term profit for a few fortunate.
There's always a big hole in this logic. How do you think they make profit? How do you think they make the money? They don't just steal it. Why do you think they're making big profits? What does that signal? What does a massive, profitable enterprise signal? It signals that that is what people want. People are purchasing what this enterprise has to offer. Now, don't get me wrong, I know they get a shed load of subsidies, but even without the subsidies, they'd be pretty successful. And on top of that, they're pretty much windfall taxed in every country. But she has just gone completely crazy here. I don't know who these handlers are. What do you mean it's racist? It's not like oil and gas is only sold to white people.
It is what we do during the coming decade that will define the coming centuries and millennia.
Well, I think that's the first time I've seen the doomsday timescale increased. It was 7 years we had to save the planet 3 years ago, which took us to 2026. Well, I'm now glad to know that we've got till 2032 to sort this. As Matt Ridley says, absolutely no one can predict the future, especially when the future is centuries away.
The first step in solving a crisis is not evaluating the full situation or taking immediate action. That comes later. The first step in solving an emergency is to realize that you are in one.
This speech is all over the place. I've had to skip sections out of this because she adds nothing, but now she's just actively contradicting herself. Before, she said,
To solve this problem, we first need to understand it.
And now she's saying,
The first step in solving a crisis is not evaluating the full situation or taking immediate action.
i.e. the first step in a crisis isn't to understand the crisis. Wait, which is it, Greta? I'm sorry, Greta's handlers. What are you talking about? Honestly, I hate everything. This is actually way worse than I thought it was going to be. I thought big claims were going to be made. They're actually making slightly less radical claims than they have in the past, which is not what I expected, but now she's just talking in circles. People eat this up. Presentations really are 90% how you say something, and I'm beginning to think that's because 90% of people don't actually listen to what is being said.
And we are not there yet. We are not aware of the fact that we are in a climate crisis. But that is not the main problem. The main problem is that we are not even aware of the fact that we are not aware.
See what I mean? What the hell does that mean? We are not aware that we are not aware we are in a climate crisis. I'm not even going to try and break that apart. That's just meaningless rhetoric. But even so, no, even the Tories allow the climate cultists to set the tone for what we need to do. We still have the net zero target for 2050, which is nuts. There's going to be a total ban on petrol and diesel car purchases, or new ones I should say, within the next decade, and every single new house that is built isn't allowed a gas boiler. In short, everything's going to have to become incredibly more expensive because of people like you, Greta. If you think that this is us not being aware that we're in a climate crisis, I don't know what the hell your solution is, which is why I keep saying, stop trying to appease her, nothing's going to be good enough. By the way, I'm just going to skip most of the rest of this speech because it is just talking in circles. And honestly, the next bit's the only interesting bit I want to go through because it's really funny.
Fascist movements offering easy, false solutions and scapegoats to complex problems are growing and becoming more normalized, even in countries like mine.
Yes, because you can only be fascist if you oppose Greta Thunberg. That's the only reasonable thing to say there. What do you mean scapegoats and easy solutions? Not even Matt Ridley says they're easy solutions. People who don't follow this whole climate cultism, they don't think that the solutions are easy. Your solutions are easy. Your solution is just do what I say and let me become green dictator. Solutions from people like me are actually quite complex. Different areas are going to be affected by the climate differently, so it's up to those areas to seek the best way to do that. And in the meantime, we can bring down carbon dioxide emissions a bit, which we're doing anyway. Whereas you want a one-size-fits-all solution of put green dictators in charge. Oh, but then also say that we have citizens' assembly so that it looks democratic and feels good. I'd love to know what she means by scapegoat. How do you scapegoat the climate crisis? I don't even know what that means.
Wars fueled by our fossil energy dependency, which is also strengthening authoritarian regimes.
Yeah, I am just completely lost here. I have no idea what she means.
Widespread poverty and social inequality, every day resulting in people's lives being put at risk.
Wait, are these examples of what the fascist scapegoat? I'm very confused.
All this while energy companies make soaring profits and world leaders cannot even agree on the bare minimum to deliver sufficient finance for loss and damage to the most affected and least responsible for this crisis.
No, she's just moved on. She just brings up fascist and then instantly drops it. I don't think she wrote this herself. She appears to be going full human rights activist / communist now. I guess expect people in university who joined in on these school strikes to now start striking over fascist scapegoats, while Greta is now no longer doing her climate activism, or, well, I guess she is, you can say here, because Greta Thunberg will not be joining the upcoming COP27 summit in Egypt as she disapproves of the country's human rights record. She's accused in the forthcoming UN conference of being held in a tourist paradise in a country that violates many basic human rights. What's the issue with a tourist paradise? Ms. Thunberg previously attended the 2019 COP25 summit in Madrid, aged just 16, and the 2021 COP26 event in Glasgow after the conference was put on hold for a year during the pandemic. Cool. She just appears to have moved from one type of activism to another. From a handler's point of view, I can only see this as trying to ride on her popularity. Oh, she's very popular now, probably one of the most famous women in the world, known for climate activism. Why don't we expand what she is an activist for? And in doing so, they've just mashed all the activism together and given a speech that, I mean, I could see some of the sense, but most of the sense was gone out the window. And I can only imagine that this is going to continue, because effectively all Greta Thunberg seems to be a front for now is for the Greta Thunberg Foundation. And I say this because she tweets, "I will not earn any money from this book as my copyright belongs to the Greta Thunberg Foundation, so all royalties go to charity." Yes, but as many people will hopefully be aware, Black Lives Matter didn't make profit. They all went to a charity that ended up just funneling into 3 black women buying a bunch of mansions. So the Greta Thunberg Foundation is the charity to keep your eye on. I imagine it is nothing more than a money laundering scheme where they give to charities every now and then. But anyway, that's a video for another time. For now, that's everything I had for you today, so as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.